Okay, so this one is called The Nature of Restitution. Now, I was going to call this The Nature of Justice, but I want to focus on restitution. I may have done a podcast about restitution before, so if so, this is part 2. So restitution really is about the restoration of something in order to make it whole, whereas justice is more of a legal term to do with the law. And, the approach to restitution is really in the context of a collaborative gifting environment, is it's always restitution based. If justice would traditionally need to be served, the focus is always upon restitution. And so you might ask, well, how can you have restitution in an obligation-free environment? And it's actually really simple, because it all self-regulates. So I'll give you a scenario. Let's say, because it's reputation-based, let's say you donate something, and you estimated the value of that donation, and it turns out that donation that you made was way overvalued, and it was, let's say there was something faulty with it, and it was less than half of the value of what you pledged in your donation. So it's obligation free. So there's no loss, because it's a gift. Nonetheless, your word, you didn't follow through with your word. And this is the key to all common law, to all the law of everything, the law of the universe, the law of nature, is that your word is everything. And your word is your bond. And so if you speak the word, and that word is corrupt, or your perspective wasn't in alignment with the truth, then that's a corruption. And it means your word is not harmonious with reality, and therefore, it's a corruption of the truth. And this is, without getting too esoteric, this creates discord. And of course, nature is always it's not seeking balance, but it's always seeking harmony. And, in nature, if anything suffers a loss, then it is always seeking to make what was lost whole. But not only that, to improve it and make it even stronger, and to negate the threat of that loss happening again in the future. So, but here's the thing: all of nature embraces that what was lost. So restitution, if you're let's say you're a bird, and you're chasing after a lizard, and you grab the lizard's tail, and the tail falls off. Now, nature is always seeking to conquer its environment in any way, shape, or form. It's the nature of all forms of life. And so that bird is responsible for taking the tail off the lizard. But that lizard is a form of life, and it's programmed to conquer its environment, to vigorously grow and expand, to thrive. And therefore, nature is seeking to replace that tail, improve it. And obviously over time, evolution, nature, the intelligence of nature has taken care of this exact issue, where a bird grabs a lizard's tail and the lizard dies. And so the lizard has evolved to let go of its tail so it can continue to survive. But the responsibility of the tail of that lizard is not the bird's responsibility. It's just following its nature. It's a bird. This is what birds do. They eat other things. Nonetheless, nature's seeking to transcend the obstacle and the barrier to thriving. And so restitution-wise, it's upon the rest of nature. And, in this scenario, it's upon the species itself and the DNA of the species. So the lizard interprets that there's a threat in the environment. That interpretation, that new perception of the environment, of the threat, actually changes the genes in the organism. And that gene sends a new signal saying, alter the genetic coding so that, the tail falls off. Obviously, this happens over a long time, but and then over time, that lizard has lizard babies, and they receive the DNA from the parents, and on and on and on it goes. But here's the thing: it's up to it's a species level thing. So in the scenario where you're in a community of human beings, and someone's word was corrupted, meaning what they pledged was inaccurate and potentially misleading, then there is no restitution because it's a gift. But there needs to be a mechanism for wholeness because someone's word was corrupted, and so that's where reputation comes in. That's the self-regulating mechanism, because it's obligation free. Everything's a gift. It's completely and entirely obligation free all the time. So you can't claim on a gift. You can't claim on a gift, but you were intending to appreciate something, but you can't appreciate something that doesn't exist. You can't appreciate the value. You can't appreciate the value of something if that value is non-existent. So it's a barrier to appreciation. So the self-regulating mechanism is reputation. And the beauty of being online today is, you can manage reputation very easily of people who make pledges and people who receive gifts, and you can get their unique perspective. And so because the value of your reputation within an ecosystem like this is virtually everything, you're always going to be seeking to reconcile any issues. And, let's say it was a mistake. Doesn't matter. You're responsible for your own mistakes. This is what self-responsibility means. You wielded your word. Your word is your bond. You expressed your word. You gave your word, and it was inaccurate and has now impacted your reputation. And so you're responsible for reconciling that. And so what you would seek to do is ultimately figure out the ideal way to keep to your word. So whatever was spoken, you give the person who was the recipient, meant to be the recipient of that gift, meaning they were the one intending to appreciate it, for the value that was stated, then you're seeking to enable that person to appreciate it as they would have expected. And if you're able to do that, then everyone's happy, the reputation isn't tarnished, and even you can see in the person's reputation you know, this event happened, and this person restored it to what was expected straight away. You know, everyone's happy. But let's say you this person didn't have the money, or didn't have the means, the capability, or the capacity to restore the pledge to the value that they said it was worth. Let's say they had no money, or they didn't have the means, they didn't have the money or the skills or whatever it may be. Then there's a real issue, and because this person can't fix their reputation, and doesn't have the means, and so this is a tension. This creates a tension, and it's always about tensions. The purpose of a tension is to initiate a collaborative discussion. Hey, we've got a tension here. How can we? And you explore, and you reconcile together, like how self-responsible people do. You reconcile together and see if there's an adequate restitution plan, and noting that it's probably not going to be called restitution because nothing's lost, but it's likely to be something along the lines of reconciliation. And if you can reconcile it together using the word, forming another, pledge of a gift, and that gift is received, then on you go. And it may be a plan to, have an extended period of time to reconcile it, and everyone's happy. But let's say you have the tension, it initiates a conversation to collaborate, and you cannot reconcile between each other because there's a dispute. What do? And this is where the person who is not happy, they then go to the community, and then they say, and this is what I'm talking about, how nature is responsible for making the species whole, is they go to the community and say, I've lost my tail. I initiated a collaborative discussion, and we didn't manage to agree, and so I'm now seeking the support of the community to give me my tail back. And you establish a collaborative gifting project, and you're asking for a gift that will enable you to be made whole, and to appreciate what you intended to appreciate in the first place. Now, this will cause, obviously, a major issue for the person who couldn't reconcile in this case, and it's very unlikely that they would allow this to go forward. And so, in this scenario, what we're actually wanting is that tension and that pressure upon the person is meant to be there. And the reason for it is because if there's someone who has not kept to their word, whether it's accidental or otherwise, it doesn't matter. You've got to come clean to the community and say, I made an error, I made a mistake. This is what I did. It was a lapse of judgment. Or I made an assumption, and I now need help to keep to my word. And so you're surrendering it to the community. You're coming clean. Now, this is still going to impact your reputation because, it happened. In nature, things happen. You don't get let off the hook in nature. You're totally responsible for your actions. And therefore it happened, and there's a record that it happened. But what people will see is how you handled it and how you came clean, with the intention of allowing it to be made visible and of, enabling that person to be made whole and continue appreciating what it is they intended to appreciate in the beginning. And, this is what it means to be self-responsible. It's to understand the impact of the word. It's to understand the impact of your choices. And it's to make sure you're always using your word responsibly. And, people who are used to, telling fibs or embellishing, there'll definitely be an adjustment, especially, it's not like you have to, tread on eggshells or anything like that, only in context of when you're pledging and, obviously receiving a gift. So what does this mean for justice, and what does it mean for crime and all that kind of stuff? Well, the reality is that our approach to crime right now is purely punishment. Of course, there is restitution as well, but it basically it's an echo of how parents raise their children, where if the child doesn't behave in the manner that we want, if they don't obey, then they get punished. They get their phone taken away, they get locked in their room. And honestly, this is a cycle of behavior that is just continues, generation after generation after generation, because it's been so normalized for so long. And, for a parent, how are they meant to cope? If they're just raising a child on their own without any help, they have to be able to control the behavior of that child in some way just to cope. Now, unfortunately, this is the normalization of this, which is, let me just make it clear, it's not natural to inhibit the nature of a child or of anything in order to control its behavior. It's and I'm sure as I'm saying this, you're realizing it, but this isn't to make you feel bad about how you parent, because every single parent does it. It's just to say that we have to break the cycle at some point and, actually give the parents the help that they're meant to receive, so that, we can allow the nature of the child to arise, and we can allow that child to endlessly explore their curiosity, so that their gifts can be revealed and then nurtured, so that they can imbue them into the ecosystem as they get older. So we do need to move towards this, of course, but, the major barrier really to parents, and I think especially mothers, is guilt. Most parents, even if they did have the support there's such an unspoken obligation that parents are meant to do it on their own, that the guilt of wanting their own life, it's just crushing. It's just crushing. And so, this isn't just a simple, yep, here's a process, yep, all good, yep, that's practical, tick the boxes. There is a huge emotional impact that we need to reconcile as well. So, I think it's important with any kind of new system or structure that moves us towards a gift-based economy or anything similar, that we factor in emotions. We can't just forget about emotions. We have to factor in mental, physical, and emotional aspects of life. And, ultimately, what we're all after is to feel good, to feel inspired, to feel fulfilled, to feel joy, to feel a sense of belonging, to feel like what we're doing matters. These are all feelings. And so why would you move forward in a life and create structures that only factor in practical things and logical things? Because when emotions are illogical, they're erratic and they're chaotic. And so it has to always be about the experience that we're wanting to create for ourselves and each other. So yeah, this is how it's this is how it can work. But talking about this cycle of punishment, and even our government is an echo of having an authority that has total control and power over us as children. Our society just mirrors that exact template of authority figures who have the power to completely dominate and control us. And, it sounds harsh when you say it like this, but the reality is that parents do have total power over a child, legally and, of course, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I think we don't really realize what that actually means when you're programming the psyche of a child. You're entrenching these beliefs, and they just manifest it in their life once they leave home and things like this. Go straight into a work environment where they have a boss, that boss is controlling, and all the rest of it. But I don't want to sound cynical here, because of course it's not like that everywhere. But, obviously we have to take a completely different approach. We have to understand that if there is in an economy where there's gifting, all of the crimes that occur are really violations of your word, but also physical violations. And impinging upon someone else's status as being completely and totally free. If you're impinging upon someone else's capability and capacity to thrive, obviously that's an issue that needs to be reconciled. It'll impact your reputation. There's a mechanism for you to be able to reconcile it through the tension. If you need a mediator, all the rest of it. But ultimately, you have to come clean and say, listen, I screwed up. I created emotional distress. I created physical distress. I had an emotional outburst, caused damage to this property. This is the value of it. And you're initiating a community project. I screwed up, and I need the community to come together to make this person whole. So this is what self-responsibility really calls of, asks of us. To the point where when things like this happen, let's say, because things like this will happen, someone will have an emotional outburst, punch a hole through a wall, and cause physical damage, cause emotional and mental distress, which has an impact, and they have to come clean. But not only do they have to come clean and say, I need to solve the financial impact to make this person whole, but I need to heal. You have to acknowledge that you have an issue, and that you need to heal, and that you're willing to reconcile it. And these are the actions that I'm taking. And and this isn't going to happen straight away. This is the vision for how it can evolve. And then the community folds in around this person, offering gifts. Oh, I've been through something similar. This is how I went through it. Here's a group that I go to for anger management. It was really helpful. It's about people coming together to bring healing, to bring understanding, because in in a collaborative gifting scenario, you've got a whole bunch of self-responsible people that realize, that know and understand the potential of human beings to murder and to hurt, commit violence. And deep down they know that, given the circumstances, they are capable of things like this as well. This is what self-responsibility asks of us, is to understand human nature. And so when people lash out, or when, they behave in a way that is impacting everyone else's capability and capacity to thrive, that they, like tribes do, is they see that as a sickness of the mind, and they approach it trying to heal, creating an environment that enables healing to come to the person who lashed out in that way, because they understand that it's pain, that hasn't been reconciled within the body of that person. And the only way to bring that healing is through love, to love that person. Now, this is, we look at tribes and, we look at tribal life and see it as primitive and not evolved. But if you think about how much we need to evolve as a society to bring this back in, to bring an approach of healing back into mainstream society, you actually see the truth in how backwards we are and how primitive we are emotionally. And, technologically and, mentally, Western society is, right up there. But spiritually, I mean, it's really sad. It's really sad. We lock people away in prison. It makes no sense. People who hurt people are hurt. They hurt people because they're hurt. So they're the people that need help, not the ones that need to be punished like they're a child. Let's bend that person's behavior to our will. Doesn't matter how their nature wants to arise, you will obey. You will change because there are consequences. That's just as primitive as it gets. It is as primitive as it gets. And, I think the biggest thing that we'll have to contend with, and as this unfolds, as a society, is the authentic desire within people for revenge, because that's actually a completely authentic response when severe trauma has been caused at the hands of someone else. That's an extremely authentic response, and it actually, the nature of revenge, I've done a podcast episode on it if you're interested. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop until the perceived, because it's an act of self-mercy. If another human being, if you view them as the source of very deep internal pain, as an act of self-mercy, mercy is seeking to eradicate the perceived source of that suffering. And mercy is, I've done a podcast episode on mercy as well. Mercy doesn't stop. It won't stop until the source of the suffering is destroyed. And this is why, if you see an animal suffering, like in the podcast episode I shared an experience I had of seeing a half-dead possum on the road, and the desire rose up within me. I wanted to go back and actually run it over properly, which is something I could never consider doing under normal terms. But that was my authentic response. Mercy is a very, very potent force, and we have to understand the nature of a human being. We have to understand how someone's emotions are going to be arising. We have to understand how people's nature is going to be responding to their environment, and we have to create an environment for that person to be able to heal. And, in that kind of scenario, locking a prisoner in a cell and leaving a person to deal with the vengeance that's rising up within them on their own is just ridiculous. The only thing that will bring healing to both of those people is for the person seeking vengeance to understand the nature of the person who caused the harm, and therefore understand the reasons why they lashed out in this way. And it's the same for the person who lashed out, because they need to reconcile it within themselves as well. And in fact, their biggest issue will be self-forgiveness, more than likely, but amongst many other things, if it's been a life of trauma that they've been through. But if the person who is seeking vengeance understands the perspective of the person who caused the pain, at least the desire for vengeance will be abated. The pain will still be there, but they won't perceive that person as the source of their suffering, and therefore the vengeance will no longer be arising. They'll just, need to reconcile their own emotions and their own sense of loss and grief, which is, I've got podcast episodes on all that stuff if you're interested. So if you haven't gathered by now, I'm not really seeking to, my motivations are not about business or commerce or money or anything like that. I'm trying to practically introduce a step-by-step, roadmap towards building the society that, I would be proud to be part of and want to be part of, where everyone feels like they belong. And, we don't feel shame when we act in ways that, we know are not ideal. We feel the love of people around us, wanting to help, wanting to support. And we're miles away from this, but I know if we just start taking steps now, holding that vision in place of what's possible, and, reconciling the space between here and there, but only working with the truth of what we're working with now, and appreciating what's right in front of us, what we want to expand. And, my hope is that the generations that come after us will be able to enjoy some of these things, the benefits of some of these things, because we dared to have the vision to achieve it now. And who knows, it could happen a lot faster than we think. But for now, this is what occupies most of my thoughts. And I'm going to keep sharing, and I'm going to keep gifting and being as involved as I can with collaborative projects. So that's it for now for the nature of restitution. We'll call it restitution. We'll call it restitution part 2 if I've done another one before. Okay, cheers for now.